Good evening, and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Lewis McGlynn. First up to date, our Ukraine update on day 455 of the Russian invasion. Ahead of signing bilateral agreements with China in Beijing today, Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin said that the relations between Russia and China are at an unprecedented high level. 9 people remain in hospital, utility supplies continue to be disrupted, and over 500 people remain displaced after the cross-border incursion into Belgorod by the so-called anti-Russian partisans on Monday, according to Vyacheslav Gladkov, governor of the Russian region. The Russian-built Crimea Bridge, linking the illegally annexed Crimean Peninsula to the Russian region of Krasnodar, was reopened today after being closed for several hours for exercises, an official from the Crimea's Russian-imposed administration said. There are reports that 2,000 people have been left without electricity in Putvil in Sumy Oblast due to Russian shelling. Alexei Likachev, the chief executive of Russia's state-owned nuclear energy business, Rosatom, attended a meeting in Beijing where he discussed security at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant with International Atomic Energy Agency head Rafael Grossi. A report compiled by UN human rights monitors has found that older people have suffered and died at a disproportionately high rate since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with some perishing because they were barred from fetching medicines or leaving basements. The results showed that about a third of the civilians killed in the first year of the war were over 60. Poland's defense minister, Mariusz Błaszczak, announced that Poland is planning to launch a submarine purchase program this year. US popular support for Washington's backing of Ukraine has faded a little, but remains widespread, a survey by the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy and NORC shows. Rishi Sunak has told a defence conference in London that Ukraine's Western allies are prepared to support the country in the war for years. A Moscow court has extended the detention of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich until the 30th of August. Mr. Gershkovich was detained in Russia on espionage charges at the end of March. Suella Braverman will remain as Home Secretary after Rishi Sunak decided not to order an investigation into whether she broke ministerial code by requesting a one-to-one speed awareness course. The Prime Minister and Braverman exchanged letters on Wednesday morning in which Braverman expressed regret for the way she had handled the situation, but Sunak said it did not need formal investigation by his ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus. The decision came after more than 72 hours of deliberations in Downing Street after the Prime Minister held meetings with both Braverman and Magnus. In a 3-page letter explaining the events in detail, Braverman said she had sought advice from a senior civil servant about whether she should attend the course, having been caught speeding while she was Attorney General in June 2022. She admitted in the letter, "In hindsight, or if faced with a similar situation again, I would have chosen a different course of action." Her principal private secretary had raised the issue with officials in the Permanent Secretary's office at the Home Office. She said, who in turn had spoken to the Propriety and Ethics team in the Cabinet Office. Her decision to involve senior civil servants raised questions over whether she had breached the ministerial code by asking them to intervene in her private matters. In a brief response, Mr. Sunak said he accepted her explanation and believed the matter did not warrant a formal investigation. The Prime Minister wrote that Sir Laurie Magnus has advised that on this occasion further investigation is not necessary and that he had accepted his advice. Mr. Sunak wrote, "On the basis of your letter and our discussion, my decision is that these matters do not amount to a breach of the ministerial code." Experts have criticised Suella Braverman's conduct, with the former senior civil servant Sir Philip Rycroft calling it a real lapse of judgment. The Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates above 5% before the end of the year, after the UK annual inflation rate fell by less than expected last month as food prices accelerated at the fastest pace for 45 years. The Office for National Statistics said annual inflation as measured by the Consumer Prices Index fell to 8.7% in April, below double digits for the first time since August, as it continued a decline from 10.1% in March. Inflation peaked at 11.1% in October. The sharp fall came as the record energy price increases for households a year earlier were not repeated, although this was offset by the rising cost of a weekly shop as food and non-alcoholic drink prices soared by 19% in the 12 months to April. City economists had forecast a bigger decline to 8.2%, while the Bank of England had said earlier this month it expected inflation to fall to 8.4% in April. The latest figure comes as economists warn that Rishi Sunak's target to halve the rate of inflation this year will be met within a finer margin than expected. After the announcement, financial markets moved to bet it was almost a certainty that the bank would increase the base interest rate by a quarter point from the current level of 4.5% when its policymakers next meet in June, with the prospect of borrowing costs reaching almost 5.4% by the end of the year. According to the latest snapshot from the ONS, electricity and gas prices contributed about 1.4 percentage points to the fall in the annual inflation rate, as last April's rise in the Ofgem price cap drops out of the calculation. The ONS said this was partly offset by food prices continuing to rise at the fastest annual rate since 1977, as well as rising costs for recreation and culture, alcoholic beverages and tobacco, communication and transport. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, said, "The IMF said yesterday we've acted decisively to tackle inflation, but although it is positive that it is now in single digits, food prices are still rising too fast." SNP Westminster Economy spokesperson Stuart Hosey MP said, "Any slight dip in the UK's sky-high inflation is to be welcomed, but prices are still soaring and the cost of living under Westminster control is still far too high for many families who were already struggling to get by after 13 years of Tory cuts, Brexit and economic mismanagement. Under the Tories, the majority of families in the UK are worse off as wages fall behind the increasingly unaffordable cost of food, housing, bills and everyday essentials, showing exactly why Scotland needs to escape Westminster control as an independent country." UK households have paid £7 billion since Brexit to cover the extra cost of trade barriers on food imports from the EU, according to researchers at the London School of Economics. The university's latest report, estimating the impact of leaving the bloc on UK food prices, found that trade barriers were consistently hampering imports, pushing up bills by an average £250. The cost of food in the UK had rocketed by 25% since 2019, the researchers calculated, but if the post-Brexit trade restrictions were not in place, then this increase would be only 17%, nearly a third lower. Adding up the impact on all UK households suggested they had paid an extra £6.95 billion as a consequence, they said. Between December 2019 and March 2023, food prices rose by almost 25 percentage points. This analysis suggests that in the absence of Brexit, this figure would be 8 percentage points, or 30% lower, the report has found. The International Monetary Fund has urged the UK government to lower non-tariff barriers to trade to lower inflation. In a health check on the UK economy, the Washington-based body said the government should work to bring down inflation generated by trade barriers with its main trade partners. The UK has the highest food inflation rate in the industrialised world, according to recent inflation data. In the latest national figures from the Office of National Statistics, the Consumer Prices Index measure of inflation fell to 8.7% from 10.1% in March, but food inflation over the past year remained elevated at 19%. Brexit trade barriers include extra paperwork to validate goods and veterinary checks on all livestock. Despite energy regulator Ofgem planning to announce a lower cap on energy bills on Thursday, which will reduce gas and electricity across the UK, the reduction will still leave an estimated 6.5 million households in fuel poverty. Under the Ofgem price cap, which will take effect from July, the average gas and electricity bill will fall from £2,500 a year under the government's energy price guarantee to just over £2,053, according to estimates from an energy analyst at Cornwall Insight. However, households which struggled to pay their bills over the winter are expected to remain hard-pressed because government payments, worth a total of £400 between October and March this year, have come to an end. At more than £2,000, typical energy bills will remain almost double the level they were before Russia began restricting gas supplies to Europe as it prepared to invade Ukraine. In October 2021, the typical household paid £1,271 a year for gas and electricity. In a forecast that will alarm hard-pressed families, Cornwall's analysts have warned that they do not expect bills to return to pre-2020 levels before the end of the decade at the earliest. National Energy Action has calculated that the number of people living in fuel poverty would remain at about 6.5 million under the new price cap. This figure is lower than the 7.5 million estimate for the winter months, but remains on a par with levels last April when fuel poverty reached a record high. Since the surge in global energy prices, an extra 2 million households have fallen into fuel poverty, according to National Energy Action. The SNP has called on the UK government to withdraw plans that will prevent overseas students from bringing dependents with them to the UK, warning new restrictions risk harming Scotland's university sector. The SNP's Education, Science, Innovation and Technology spokesperson, Carol Monaghan MP, together with Europe and EU accession spokesperson, Alan Smith MP, and Home Affairs spokesperson, Alison Thewlis MP, have today written to the Home Secretary urging her to scrap the plans immediately. A report produced last week by the Higher Education Policy Institute, Universities UK International, and Kaplan International Pathways in collaboration with London Economics showed that in 2021 to 2022, international students provided a net contribution of £37.4 billion to the UK economy, an increase from the £23.6 billion in 2015 to 2016. The same analysis revealed that EU domiciled students contributed a net economic impact of £125,000 per student, with non-EU students contributing a net economic impact of £96,000 per student. In Glasgow Central, this means international students provided a net economic benefit of £292.4 million, whilst in the constituencies of Stirling and Glasgow North West. The benefits were £113.3 million and £83.6 million respectively. Commenting, Carol Monaghan MP said, "International students make an invaluable contribution to our economy, enrich our society, and have skills which are proving ever more vital in this post-Brexit climate, which has seen the UK deprived of workers across key sectors. This policy is a smokescreen for Braverman's real agenda to launch an attack on migrants regardless of the benefits they bring to the UK. She is pursuing a short-sighted, reactionary programme to stoke tensions with international students being caught in the crossfire. It is grossly unfair that in Scotland, where international students' contribution to university campuses, research and wider society is celebrated, will have to suffer the consequences of this misjudged policy. Once again, it is indicative of how out of tune the Conservative government is with the Scottish people." ScotGov Education Secretary announces a summit on tackling violence in schools. A summit focused on tackling violence in schools will be convened by Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth in the coming weeks. It will bring together young people, parents and carers, schools, local authorities and unions to discuss how to tackle the problem. This will build on guidance provided to local authorities and on the £2 million of funding to support violence prevention activities within schools and communities. Education Scotland will also work with every local authority to identify good practice in behaviour and relationships, sharing the findings with schools across the country. Speaking during a debate in Parliament, Ms Gilruth said, "I have been in post for 2 months now, and during that time I have made it absolutely clear that behaviour in schools is one of my top priorities. Children and young people must have every opportunity for successful learning that is unhindered by disruptive behaviour. I also want to make sure that teachers and school staff are working in a safe, welcoming and supportive environment. Any form of violence in our schools is completely unacceptable. No teacher or pupil should suffer verbal or physical abuse, and parents should be able to send their children to school knowing that they are safe." Amanda Gorman gutted after Florida school bans her Biden inauguration poem. Amanda Gorman, the American poet who shot to international stardom when she recited The Hill We Climb at Joe Biden's presidential inauguration, has vowed to defeat book bans in Florida after the poem was removed for reading by elementary school children in an educational institution in Miami-Dade County. Miss Gorman said that she was gutted to learn that a complaint from a single parent led to her inaugural poem being banned from Bob Graham Education Center in Miami Lakes. The poem was one of 5 books challenged by a parent of children at the school, including the ABCs of Black History and books on Cuba. In the complaint, the parent mistakenly listed Oprah Winfrey as the author of The Hill We Climb, and said she objected to the poem because it was, quote, not educational and have indirectly hate messages. Amanda Gorman hit back in a lengthy social media post. She said, "So they ban my book from young readers, confuse me with Oprah, fail to specify what parts of my poetry they object to, refuse to read any reviews, and offer no alternatives. Unnecessary book bans like these are on the rise, and we must fight back." The poet invited supporters to donate to the writers' group PEN America, which she said had joined her publisher Penguin Random House to issue a lawsuit challenging book restrictions in Florida. Book bans have surged in Florida in the wake of a series of laws signed by the Republican governor Ron DeSantis, who is poised to launch a presidential campaign. The most recent legislation, enacted earlier this month, requires schools to remove books immediately based on a complaint from even a single parent. According to PEN America, 565 books were banned in Florida schools in the 2021 to 2022 school year. Significant progress on reducing courts backlog in Scotland. Audit Scotland have reported that the criminal trial backlog that built up during the COVID-19 pandemic has been significantly reduced, but waiting times for the most serious crimes have doubled. The Scottish Government and its justice system partners responded quickly and effectively to the pandemic through the £100 million Recover, Renew and Transform programme. Additional court capacity and innovations such as remote jury centres in cinemas saw the number of outstanding trials drop from a peak of 43,606 in January of 2022 to 28,029 in February of 2023. Good use of modelling data by the Scottish Courts and Tribunals Service informed this successful approach. But clearing the backlog of cases of serious assault, murder and rape, known as solemn cases, is proving much more difficult than the summary cases such as common assault and motoring offences. Average waiting times for the most serious crimes, which disproportionately affect women and children, have more than doubled since 2020. These cases are not expected to be cleared until March of 2026. By comparison, summary cases are on track to be cleared by March 2024. The Scottish Government is currently piloting new initiatives, such as virtual trials within the criminal court system, that could fundamentally change how it operates. However, it is still too early to evaluate the impact of this work. Some stakeholders in the legal profession are resistant to the use of virtual trials because they believe they reduce access to justice, but others, such as victim support groups, feel they improve the quality of evidence and reduce the distress of victims and witnesses. ScotGov increases the Scottish Land Fund. Rural Affairs, Land Reform and Island Secretary Mary Googan has announced a £1 million increase to the Scottish Land Fund, a flagship scheme that helps communities take ownership of local land and buildings. Miss Googan visited Granton Community Gardeners Project, a previous recipient of support from the fund. She said, "Since 2016, hundreds of local groups have benefited from the Scottish Land Fund. It allows people to buy land and buildings in their areas to put the needs of their community first, helping to create jobs, mitigate climate change, and tackle social isolation and loneliness. It is only right that those that know what's best for their area have a say in how local land and buildings are used." The Granton Community Gardeners have gone from strength to strength since their humble beginnings in 2010. The project is a prime example of what the power of community action can achieve and the positive impact that the group has had on their local area is inspirational. A total of £11 million in grants will be available through the Scottish Land Fund in 2023 to 2024 for voluntary, community, or public sector organisations to apply for support to buy land or land assets in urban and rural Scotland. £9.5 million of ScotGov funding for youth music programme. Culture Secretary Angus Robertson has confirmed £9.5 million of funding for Scotland's flagship youth music initiative this year. This includes £500,000 which has been ring-fenced to deliver on the commitment to expand the YMI model into other art forms. YMI funding enables schools and other organisations to provide quality music-making activities for children and young people, which range from after-school drum bands to courses in sound production. More than 362,000 children and young people took part in YMI-funded projects under the 2021 to 2022 programme, the majority of those in high deprivation areas. The funding also supported 1,182 music education posts across all of Scotland's 32 local authorities. Mr. Robertson marked the funding award with a visit to Murrayburn Primary School in Sighthill, Edinburgh, where he met pupils who have benefited from the programme, which is administered by Creative Scotland. The Culture Secretary said, "Music plays a vitally important role in young people's lives, and beyond developing their wider skills and learning, we know these kinds of activities also have a huge positive impact on their confidence and well-being. We are committed to ensuring every school pupil in Scotland can access a year of free music tuition by the time they leave primary school through the YMI, no matter their background." Well, that is it for this evening, but before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So, to everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. Good night, and thank you for watching.